We will be looking at the events that took place in an area of Derry, Northern Ireland, called Bogside, on the 30th of January 1972. These events led to the deaths of 14 people at the hands of the British troops. The violence erupted after a protest march led by members of the Northern Ireland Civil Rights Association was prevented from entering the Derry city centre. This protest was part of a larger, long-running conflict between the larger major political parties of Ireland, which have, in the course of their fighting, caused the separation of Ireland into the two states that we have today. We will be discussing and identifying the possibilities of terrorism within these events and conflicts, as both sides have been argued to have had involvement in terrorist activities. The Oxford English Dictionary describes terrorism as the unofficial or unauthorised use of violence and intimidation in the pursuit of political aims. Ellen's going to introduce us more to some of the history.
Okay, with Ireland, since the Norman conquest, there have been lots, in fact entirely almost of Ireland has been in a struggle for independence, mostly from Britain, and since towards the ending of the 19th century these people have been mostly Catholic, because in the 17th century there were a lot of Protestant Scottish people moving into the northern section of Ireland called Ulster, and towards the end of the 19th century, where they had been previously wanting independence like everyone else, they started to warm up to staying as a part of the UK because they didn't want to be ruled by Catholics, and the UK was a Protestant, well, technically a Protestant country. So when the UK started to discuss giving the option of home rule to Ireland, the people in Ulster and Northern Ireland were strongly opposed to it, and they were strongly opposed to it. But there were a lot of nationalists as well, and in 1916 there was an uprising of nationalists and the precursors to the IRA, for whom home rule would not be independent enough. And this was put down, but it sowed the seeds for some more violence. And in 1918 there was a general election, and the Irish Nationalist Party Sinn Féin won a large majority, but instead of turning up to Parliament, they formed their own little parliament in Ireland and decided to make their own illegal Republic of Ireland. They started a terrible war between Britain and Ireland, involving lots of massacres and the Black and Tans. It's all really, really complicated. I've tried my best to simplify it. The main point is, in the early 20s, Ireland was partitioned into North and South to try to stop this violence, and this partition proved to be permanent, isolating a few Catholics in Northern Ireland, where they were subjected to quite a lot of discrimination, and also inviting the IRA to be extremely dissatisfied with this and violent across the border of Northern Ireland. That's all I've got to say. Yes, Daniel.
The British Army will have a very differing view on the events of Bloody Sunday. The army were originally brought in to keep the peace and man the boundaries between the fighting Northern Ireland and Southern Ireland. The army were under gunshot during the day. One para of the regiment was brought in as they're famous for their counter-terrorism acts, but are also known for being more aggressive. They knew the IRA were at the rally, but still showed aggression. The soldiers of one para were under continual bombardment from civilians. Colonel Derek Wilford, who was directly in charge of one para, may have possibly disobeyed the direct order from his superior, Brigadier McClellan. Whether he just misinterpreted the order or directly disobeyed it is known to him, but at the end of the Savile inquiry he was eventually even awarded the Order of the British Empire by the Queen.
Now, one of the main contributing factors that was believed to actually cause Bloody Sunday was it was actually a warning shot fired by a British soldier. Now, when this warning shot ricocheted, other British soldiers believed they were actually being fired upon by IRA soldiers, which then caused them to fire back. Now, in several of the cases where civilians were actually killed, they were shot in the back, which would actually suggest they were running away from the British soldiers and therefore didn't pose a threat. And there is where the problem lies, in that if they were running away, that would therefore suggest they were war crimes that the British soldiers were committing. And as has happened sort of recently, criminal charges have been brought against some of those British soldiers. And I have to ban.
Before the events of Bloody Sunday, the Catholics felt that they had no rights, and due to the majority of the government being Protestants, they felt that therefore they was favoured. The Catholics seek protection from the British Army against mobs and welcomed the army greatly before the event. However, the violent acts of the army and what many people would call innocent killings caused the Catholics to strongly turn against the army. In fact, the army was now seen as an enemy rather than a protector. Bloody Sunday was the first protest against the British in the eyes of the Catholics, and the 30th of January is now seen as a day of mourning. Although it was the request of the Protestant government to deploy the British Army to Ireland to calm rallies and marches, neither wanted to take responsibility. And it wasn't until many years later that an inquiry found that the Catholic marchers on Bloody Sunday had committed no wrongdoings. One Protestant's view of Bloody Sunday was that there was an agreement within the Protestant community that there was a great wrong carried out during the events of Bloody Sunday. I will now hand over to Charlotte, who will describe the inquiry.
The two reports that followed Bloody Sunday were the Widgery and Savile reports. They're very differing views. The Widgery backs up the English soldiers and blames the civil rights marchers for creating a potentially dangerous situation. However, many years later the Savile report was published, which stated that the British soldiers did in fact lose control and that the blame should actually rest with the support company. Savile stated that the British soldiers did not act in response to the civilians being dangerous. The Widgery... this quote basically states that he felt that British paratroopers acted accordingly due to the circumstances, and the soldiers were their own judge on whether they should shoot the gunmen. He admitted that there was a scale of response on the soldiers, some showing a high degree of responsibility, and at the other end it did border on reckless. Tony Blair believed that the Widgery report was done too soon after the event. Widgery was not able to gain all the evidence to gain a fair conclusion. The Savile report strongly disagreed with what the soldiers did on that day. He stated that the marchers were not posing a threat. David Cameron apologised on behalf of the government, however, he would not say whether he thought the soldiers should be prosecuted.